I am here with Mike McLaughlin in person.
How's everybody doing this morning?
Jules Falcone and Joanne McLaughlin may be here during some point during the show. Joanne is asleep in the same building that we are in. She manages a bar near here and tends to come home pretty late. And I imagine it was pretty rowdy last night because the Philadelphia Eagles, well, let's just say, boycott NFL isn't doing so well in southeast Pennsylvania this year. On the line is Shad Olson joining us from South Dakota. He wasn't on last week, but he's become a regular on the show. Emmy Award-winning journalist, conservative. Yes, he was in big media and conservative, and he's not in big media anymore. And Mike Closer, as you're probably used to, is here also. And he tends to start off the Monday shows. We did 10 minutes before him last week, and then he was sick 2 weeks ago, so he was on Tuesday. And one last part of the intro, you can follow him at the Best Closer on Periscope, where he does a show 5:30 a.m. Eastern Time every weekday morning, and you can follow him on Twitter. He's fairly active there at the Best Closer. So, Mike, this may be a show, hopefully, where I'm not doing that much talking, which I love that. I'm cool being producer, not saying much. Mike McLaughlin will join if need be, but you, and to a lesser extent, you're the star, obviously, the first 10 minutes, but Shad's going to jump in a lot, and we'll see if I even need to talk that much. So with that in mind, Mike, I know you have a lot to talk about. Thanks for joining.
Thank you very much for having me. Good morning, everybody. And you referred to my Friday episode after watching my morning show this morning, and on Friday I put together some of the pieces of the puzzle regarding what really went down in Las Vegas and how it all tied back to the Saudi soft coup we all witnessed over the last 7 to 10 days.
All right, I didn't watch it. We are listening. Okay, go on, because I have no idea.
Yes. Does everyone remember how cheap gas used to be back in 2013 to 2016? I'm sure you do. It was quite low. And it all ties back to fracking as well. And if you remember how much fracking took over in the United States and even bailed Ohio out and made John Kasich look good. Everyone remembers that, I'm sure.
Yep, and Shad knows the oil industry. So
absolutely. Well, it really pissed off the Saudis, which caused quite a few things to happen and some struggles between a couple families. And with that in mind, one of the families in particular owned 4 floors of the Mandalay Bay called the Four Seasons Hotel. I'm sure you may have heard some of that in someone's news story somewhere along the lines. Did everyone know that?
No, I didn't hear that.
I didn't hear that either, but you definitely have our attention here.
Yes, so the top 4 floors are owned by them. The top floor on October 1st was booked for 30 fighters and one of the kings. One of the kings who dressed in street clothes was gambling at another hotel down the street at the Tropicana. And if you notice, there were 4 different hotels with shootings. All 4 hotels reported shootings because of what was really going on, which was an arms deal that had gone bad. And it all ties back to Paddock. Paddock was in there with only 2 loaded weapons. And if everyone heard all the tapes, you'll clearly see that it took 40 seconds between shootings at the crowd, which was mainly just a diversion tactic after what happened. So I could read you more of the story, but I suggest watching my Friday episode. Yeah. But it really does tie back to the struggle between 2 families, one in particular that's about to take power within this week and just promised Israel $6 billion to fight Hezbollah and Iran.
Biblical stuff. What was the incentive, though, of killing people at a concert? That's what I'm not following, and I know Shad's going to have a lot to say.
So, absolutely, I can tie it back to that, too. So here's what happened here. On October 1st, 2017, the top floors of the Mandalay Bay, the Four Seasons, we'll call it, was owned by billionaire Talal. It's Prince Talal and or King Talal, who was occupying that floor that night. So if everyone didn't know that, it's clearly on their registry. And I've been piecing this together since October 1st.
With what? I mean, like, where are you getting your information, just out of curiosity?
A little bit of Laura Loomer, a little bit of Mix, a little bit of about 7 different sources, and some of the reports you saw erroneously online.
And Laura Loomer's on the show sometimes here, just so people know.
Excellent. All right, so the plan all along was for some people to come in and take out King Solomon and kill him. They thought he was in the top floor. He was not. King Solomon was in Russia at the time, and they had false intel. When they came to the room, they found out it was not him. It turned out they were shooting at a patsy that was in that room for another reason. I don't want to get into the long part of the story, but the bottom line is they broke the windows, started shooting at the crowd to make it look like a crazy person, and then they started shooting at the tanks from another window. Those 2 people killed themselves before they were captured, and the door was rushed. Those 2 bodies were removed, And this is not a conspiracy situation or anything like that. If you just watch my Friday episode or listen, you'll see the clear picture.
Mike, there's another component to this,
and
I concur with the research that you've done about that, and clearly the Saudi Arabian ownership of the top floors of the Mandalay is what allowed all this to happen. Well, one thing about oil prices is that the thing to realize is that the Saudis, and as a commodities futures trading guy, the Saudis actually crashed that price on purpose. And the reason they did it was to try to shake out some of the fracking market from the United States, which has had such a deep incursion into the world market. They were protecting market share. And so you go back to 2013, 2014, they cut their Asian export price 3 times in the span of 2 weeks. And that's what started us on the long decline from about $104 down to 60. The first jump was down to about $84, and we've seen that decline all the way down to where we are now at 55. But their extraction costs are just so much cheaper than what we can match in terms of either Eagle Ford down in Texas or the Permian Basin or of course the Bakken up to my north here in North Dakota. And so there has been a lot of struggle. What that does to the Saudi social system, of course, it puts a lot of pressure on their ability to meet the obligations that they've put in place in terms of the way they take care, quote unquote, of their people with that oil money. And so there's a lot of political pressure inside Saudi Arabia, and that indeed is, as you identify, played into that coup situation and the shifting of power that's taking place.
Let me ask you.
Spot on. You're actually spot on. There was one more component to that, because after President Trump's visit in May, they were being forced to modernize and turn to manufacturing and reliance on other things beyond oil, which was a huge turn of events for that country.
It's a revolution that's happening over there. Part of American fracking has been the lever that's really put them in a bind in terms of their world market share, and that's why the other part of it is that part of the conflict that's happening is there is pressure inside Saudi Arabia to actually break the tie that was built in 1974, which with Bretton Woods III, which established the petrodollar. And that's something we needed to keep our eye on more than anything, is because, as we all know, when Richard Nixon ended the gold standard and decided that oil was going to be the new solid to which the dollar would gravitate and be tied to, that puts us directly behind the 8 ball. If anything happens in Saudi Arabia that allows somebody to get into power that puts an end to that, we see competition between a couple of solid currencies in the yuan, which the Chinese are moving very clearly to make a gold-backed currency. The rupee plays in there as well with India, and even Russia has been buying gold faster than just about any nation on earth as they get ready to pose a very solvent, very solid, very stable exponent and alternative to the dollar as world reserve currency. And all of this plays in. Saudi Arabia literally has been the only thing that's kept the American economy afloat in the past 40 years. And the reason, of course, for that is that the dollar is tied to petroleum as world reserve currency, and that's what provides the stability and the unmitigated, unprecedented era of prosperity that the United States has enjoyed.
Heavy-duty stuff, and we may give you a break late in the show and talk about things that are a little less intense, like Marshawn Lynch, Gloria Allred, Roy Moore, and Al Franken, but I want to stick with this for a while. So...
Can I, Adam, would you mind if I ask Mike a question?
Yeah, no, please, take it away.
There's data that I'm seeing coming out of some flight traffic that took place the night of the shooting.
It's true.
In terms of a lot of helicopter traffic in and around the Mandalay and then next door, the Delano Hotel.
And those are near the airport.
No, there were helicopters that were flying to and from. And it just seems like it could make a lot of sense if those were used either in both the infill and the exfil operations to get those shooters out.
Here's what happened. So you are correct. So the flight tower recordings that I played on my show showed that there were shootings on the tarmac. There were 4 hotels. The prince, who was in the top floor, was gambling at the Tropicana. When he was in street clothes, he was rushed out by the FBI and put into a helicopter while they took enemy fire from at the bottom floor. And you may have noticed Laura Loomer posted a picture of a body on the floor of the Tropicana in with a sheet over his head. I posted it anyway. It was on my show. Someone else may have seen it also. You are correct.
Yeah.
They took off in helicopters. There were 3 reported helicopters, one leaving the scene with the highest-ranking person of that family to safety, and they did get out alive.
The question that when we look at the totality of the situation, how much do the local authorities actually know about what took place? Do they know everything? And why do they believe that they can keep this covered up when there's so many sources of information and so many data points that people are now starting to connect? All this does, every single time we have an incident like this, this is just ultimate damage to the public trust. And people, we just come to a point where we know that we can't trust anything that our government says about anything.
Well, Mike McLaughlin are here, and that's time for our first break. So that's Coco over there telling us it's time for a break, and we'll be back in 1 minute. Okay, you're listening to Backlash here on Shark Nation Radio. Adam Taxon here in Delaware County with Mike McLaughlin and Jules Falcone just joined us. Exciting times in Philly where boycott NFL is not going well because the Eagles are just kicking ass. So Jules was probably up late last night watching too. If everyone's in too good a mood, that's why. The boycott NFL is not going well here. But more importantly, we have Mike Closer and Shad Olson who are in the middle of a really good discussion. We're just sort of just sitting here, letting them go, talking about Saudi Arabia and the connection to Las Vegas, and we'll continue with that right now. Okay, one of you guys has the floor. Wait, Jules, just say hi real quick.
Hi, Mike and Shad. I'm Jules Falcone. I live in the Philadelphia area.
Hey, Jules. Nice to know you here.
Pleasure.
And we're going to let you guys do your thing for a while.
So what about Saudi Arabia?
We were picking up on the story of what was going on in Vegas and how one of the Prince and the Kings owned the top 4 floors of the Mandalay Bay, which was called the Four Seasons Hotel. It ties back to who was supposed to be in the top floor with 30 protectors from these potential assassins that were in town to murder the king. The king turns out that he was in Russia at the time, but here's where the story picks up.
Jules, you got a lot to catch up on.
If you don't mind, yeah. The assassins are already in Paddock's room. They get a phone call. They're told the prince is not in the suite above, that he actually was gambling at the Tropicana down the street, and that he's been escorted out of the Tropicana and whisked to safety. They started panicking, and they are told the plot to assassinate the prince has now disappeared, and they don't know what to do. The first assassin kills himself. The second one pauses for 10 seconds, contemplates life, kills himself, and that is when Paddock, they say that Paddock starts firing on the crowd below. It turns out it was never Paddock at all. Paddock was already killed by these 2 assassins, and they're the ones who broke the windows, fired on the crowd below, and also fired on the gas tanks to cause a diversion so they could escape because they were using the staircase between the top 4 floors of the Mandalay Bay.
So Paddock was just basically an unwitting patsy, essentially. He didn't even know.
For the FBI. He was there for an arms deal for the FBI, had no clue, and only had 2 weapons loaded. That is why they ran out so quickly in the first set of shots being fired.
Got it. What was Paddock doing there this time? Just being taken care of by the FBI? Just had no idea what even was going on?
I missed the beginning of what you said.
I mean, what was Paddock even doing when all this was taking place? Or he guessed they were killing him?
He was there for an arms deal with 2 people that were there to look at 2 or 3 different weapons that he had. He had only loaded 2 of them and was showing them the weapons in the room. They were there as a diversion.
Gotcha.
The FBI is behind this. The reason they don't want this to come out is because they didn't want this whole story, to come out that they were involved in an arms deal.
Imagine that, the FBI in an arms deal. Probably one of
by the way, by this time, Jesus Campos comes knocking at the door, and they turn and start unloading on him and had over 200 rounds shot through the door, and Campos gets hit and escapes, obviously, lethal shots and calls security. And if you look at the timeline, you'll clearly see that multiple shootings in hotels were going on before any shooting started at the Mandalay Bay / Four Seasons.
And that information has been suppressed, and that's why they're being so evasive about all of this?
It's all on police radar. On the audio tapes. So I played about 5 audio tapes showing, hearing the shootings being reported in on police scanners at 4 hotels and on the tarmac and by the tower at the airport reporting the same thing.
And the airport, I remind people, I don't know if it's relevant, is pretty close to the Mandalay Bay. It's in the southern part of the Las Vegas Strip. That's pretty much the end of the Vegas Strip near the Mandalay Bay. Wow, I mean, this is beyond my pay grade. I think Mike and Jules probably feel the same way.
I've never heard that story.
Yeah, why? You know, what's amazing is, what is it, like close to 2 months after it now?
Yeah.
I mean, the story has completely disappeared, which is kind of scary, but they can distract us with Al Franken, Roy Moore. I mean, not that there isn't some merit to those stories, but it's so easy to distract people. And, you know, with Jesus Campos, let me ask a question. You know, part of the sort of under the radar, but maybe not that far under the radar story is simply that he's an illegal alien, and you know, this subjects them, not that an illegal alien is necessarily a worse security guard than anyone else, to just a lot of lawsuits from people. What is the state of security there? I mean, how much truth is that, or is that just like a sort of semi-red herring there?
I think that's a red herring. He also traveled to Mexico right after, somehow, after being severely injured, and made his way back for the Ellen show or whatever the heck show.
Which is bizarre in itself.
His appearance on.
That's amazing.
Hey guys, they got like 200 cameras out there at the Mandalay, the Bay Casino. Where's all the video from that?
So
The FBI has it all.
They do. And there's also 32,000 cell phones in the area, 29,000 smartphones, and nothing uploaded from the cloud has been shown to this minute.
Not one.
How about
Not
that?
one.
Well, not to mention, how many eyewitnesses are we up to now that have been killed in
Five or six.
What?
I thought it was higher than that, Mike. I thought we were upwards of 20 now.
Wait, what?
Of people that were killed, that were trying
Yes. Yeah, a family was just killed by fire.
Yeah, people who died who were, you know, direct witnesses who actually gave statements identifying multiple shooters, not just on the floors in the hotel, but on the ground and in other locations on the Vegas Strip.
How could that
There's a little
possibly
bit more.
be
You're
suppressed?
absolutely right. If I can add one more thing. After all this happened, on November 3rd, you might have heard that there was a missile intercept by the Saudi military. That was the last-ditch effort to be the anti-King sounding group to kill them before this coup took over, which was put in place by Jared Kushner. He flew a week before President Trump's trip and was responsible for putting this new group in power that was promised in May. And in response, the Saudi government owes the United States trillions for protecting them. They agreed to give Israel roughly $6 billion to fight Hezbollah and Iran because of this deal.
So, I mean, okay.
Let's Adam, if you'll indulge me just a little bit.
Totally.
Let's take this all the way back to 9/11.
None of us know what to say here.
I'm stunned, guys.
It's impossible to look at the totality of American and Saudi relationship and not take into consideration 9/11, what happened with it, the reason that they were drawn into that, and very, very plausibly, according to some analysts, everything that we're watching now is a result of what, in the minds of a faction over there, has been complete mismanagement of Saudi policy by letting them get dragged into a situation that literally crashed the world oil price. And you look at the social costs for them and what's happened to their economy and some of the ways that they've been put behind the eight ball because of their dependence and the one-dimensionality of their oil economy. Take this all the way back to 9/11. Remember what we were paying for oil on September 10th of 2001. And that was $28 a barrel. And you look at in the follow up or what happened after that. There would have been no American fracking market without the geopolitical and everything that happened in 2 wars, Afghanistan, Iraq. We go and we lie to the world about weapons of mass destruction. What we were really doing was taking out Saddam Hussein because he wanted to trade Iraqi oil for gold, and he wanted gold-backed currency. So did Muammar Gaddafi. And so you look at the map of the Middle East, and it's very easy to see. Leave it to an oil guy to kind of look at things through the lens of the black stuff. But I just when we understand the crucial nature of the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia in basically running the grand chessboard, as Zbigniew Brzezinski called it, and making sure that the Saudis are the ones who dictate OPEC policy. They dictate the maintenance of the dollar as world reserve currency. Everybody who's tried to trade oil for gold in the past has been killed. And there's a faction inside Saudi Arabia that has always believed and has come to believe that we have done so much damage to our own currency that it's in turn there's inclement fallout and ancillary damage that's happened to their economy as a result of having oil tied to a fiat currency that we've literally driven into the ground. It is strong by world comparative standards, but if you look at the overall loss in value of the U.S. dollar in the past 40 years, sure, it's easy to see they're not getting the same compensation for their product, even at elevated prices and inflated prices. They're not getting the same value for their product as they once did on the world market.
And I want to remind,
I know that there's a faction inside Saudi Arabia that totally believes that they were pulled into 9/11 and then they were complicit in 9/11, and that event in and of itself was responsible for the remaking of the world petroleum market in favor of United States export.
I want to just remind people, let me remind people, Shad is in the Black Hills of South Dakota, not immediately close to North Dakota. Hell, the part of Pennsylvania we're in is probably closer to fracking geographically than where he is to where it is in North Dakota in particular and South Dakota. But there aren't that many people out there, and so you're one of the people who's, relatively speaking, close to it, and this is your area of expertise. And again, I have Mike McLaughlin and Jules Falcone with me here in Southeast Pennsylvania, and on the line, Mike Closer, who's in the Washington, D.C. area in Maryland, and Shad Olson in South Dakota. Sorry, I just want to remind people who's talking here.
Hey, Shad. Shad, the Saudi government is in chaos. I mean, they've got one child starving every 10 minutes.
In Saudi Arabia?
In Saudi Arabia.
People are starving in Saudi Arabia.
Every 10 minutes. This the government putting pressure on the people. They're using it as like a weapon. There's no supplies.
True? Are they citizens or slaves? Or
they're citizens. They're people.
These are Saudi Arab people who are starving.
Yeah, but they're also transitioning off of oil. They're going to get off the oil teat over the next 3 years or 4 years or so and turn into a new society. It's a major undertaking they're about to go through.
But they're using this as leverage.
It is, but when President Trump visited in May, right after he left, what did they announce? That women are allowed to drive now. Everything we're bringing to them, they are agreeing to do in exchange for all of the support we're giving them. And so that's one step in a direction they've never been. Their society is way behind, and that's why they're making these changes. And you mentioned earlier the weapons of mass destruction. That's what was in Benghazi. That's where they were moved to, and that's where they were held for years. And that's why nobody will talk about Benghazi, the truth. They were all stolen that night, and that's why people were killed. And they still won't talk about it today.
Well, and it becomes very clear that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama wanted those weapons in the hands of the Syrian quote unquote rebels. ISIS is fake and bake in the same way that Al Qaeda was CIA, and ISIS, our support, our material support and financial support and creation of ISIS, hand in hand with Saudi Arabia, mind you, because let's also realize that Bin Talal is the controlling shareholder in one of the largest private military companies in the world, in ETS Risk Management. And those fighters have been identified. There've been some of them who've been killed and identified, but they're comprised of special forces people from around the world who actually work for ETS Risk Management. They've been embedded with ISIS. They've been killed in battle with ISIS and identified. The ties between that ETS Risk Management company, a Saudi Arabian private security concern, and ISIS are absolutely undeniable. So it's very clear we've been arming, and we wanted the Syrian gas attack. All of this has been a frame-up job to depose governments and to regime change all over the Middle East to allow Saudi Arabia to increase their foothold and basically control the entirety of the region under a single caliphate, in hopes that they will remain loyal to us instead of us having to fight a world war with Islam. And I just don't know how you can paint it any differently than what we're seeing play out.
Let me ask one question. Being the only Jew on this five-person session, the Bible does talk about, and we're in Genesis right now, not that far into it, how in the end Ishmael sort of repents. I mean, all you Edomites here, it might not work out so well for you guys, but we're just talking what the Bible says. I'm just a little confused where Israel really fits in here. I mean, is this biblical prophecy coming on here? I don't know. I mean, it's so mind-blowing. I mean, I'm ready to talk about Al Franken touching a girl's butt. This is just so, something simple like that.
I do have a comment. I mean, you are seeing the quietest moments ever between the Palestinians and Israel right now because of the brokering of potentially in the background one of the hardest deals in history to make. And if this is possible to be brokered, it will set up the Saudi region to be really more of an Americanized situation there. I mean, it really sets us deep into our future for 25 years.
And we have to bring up one other thing. Iran. I mean, Iran's a big part of this.
Yeah. Iran's a problem.
It's hard for, I'm sorry, I'm talking over the top, but it's hard for us as Americans to understand the one-dimensionality of those economies over there. Whether it's Libya, whether it's Saudi Arabia, they have no money. They have these massive social programs that they promised, basically, because of the oil profits, they promise entitlements. We as conservatives, we're always mad about state-level entitlements. Think of the entitlements that happen in Saudi Arabia, where every child is basically cradle to grave, everything that they need paid for by the oil economy.
Then are they starving?
All of that is falling apart.
They're falling apart because they're using starvation as a weapon.
So this is like a communist tactic. They're just starving their people, consolidating power. Right. And how much of this, again, a simplistic question, but, I just don't have the expertise you do, but I'm trying to do it, as the layman would think. How much of this is a sort of drain the swamp thing, but it's not necessarily corrupt? It's just sort of wealthy parasites who for generations have been used to living luxurious lifestyles that they didn't earn. I mean, which we're used to in the West, but not to the same extent.
It's a good question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely draining the swamp from the other end. And I don't know, and we probably won't know the connections with the Trump camp and the entree of the new leadership in Saudi Arabia. We won't know those connections for a while in terms of what might have happened in the run-up to all this. But if you can't get the American Department of Justice to reveal the alligators, draining, there's more than one end of the pool, and it looks there's pretty convincing case that can be made for this being a situation where the other end of the pool is being drained, and ostensibly it's going to cause the revelation and the revealing of American corruption and the ties. Between all that Saudi Arabian money into the Clinton Foundation, the Saudi Arabian money that was paid to the Obama campaign, and the money laundering back and forth that's gone on through select law firms in Washington, D.C. and lobbying groups between those Saudi Arabian power brokers and the American political system.
And I have a good metaphor to stick in here.
Al-Walid owned Time Warner. He owned major shareholder in Time Warner, in Twitter, and CNN. And so the narrative that has been spit on the microphone for the last few years, if you just go back and watch the tape, it's clear.
Absolutely true, Mike.
And
they've dictated that. They've dictated message for years.
I got to stick in something from all the time I spend in Florida. It seems like once you drain a swamp, I know alligators, they just move to a different one. They're pretty adaptable, and I think we can read into something there. Let me just take another break, and then I think we'll just get into some of the other issues going on, which aren't quite as intense, a little less mind-blowing, but still worth talking about. I am here with Jules Falcone and Mike McLaughlin in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, and on the phone with me, and hopefully they'll stay on for a while, Mike Closer in Maryland and Shad Olson in South Dakota, and you are listening to Backlash on Shark Nation Radio.